Well, as it turns out, UN peacekeepers are not the only ones being pressured to leave the African continent. France is being pushed out of a Sahel region by the Coup government in Niger. But President Emmanuel Macron even goes as far as to claim that if indeed it wasn't for the French presence, West African states wouldn't even exist.
In a major diplomatic move, Moscow has appointed its first permanent ambassador to Niger in over 3 decades. Russia's ambassador to Niger was previously stationed in Mali, but last August, Russian President Vladimir Putin named Viktor Voropayev to be Russia's ambassador in Niger's capital, Niamey.
A major diplomatic shift is unfolding in West Africa, and it is drawing global attention. Niger has officially received a new ambassador from Russia, marking a clear change in its foreign partnerships. This comes as France's role in the country continues to shrink, following decisions by Niger's authorities to reduce and end certain forms of cooperation. At the same time, the alliance of Sahel states, known as the AES, is moving closer together, strengthening ties among Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso. The arrival of the Russian ambassador is not a symbolic move alone. Diplomatic appointments usually signal intent. They show where a government wants to build long-term relationships. In this case, Niger is sending a message that it is looking beyond its traditional partners and exploring new security, economic, and political options. For decades, France played a central role in Niger, especially in security and military cooperation. French forces were present in the country as part of broader counterterrorism efforts across the Sahel. French companies were also involved in key sectors, including energy and mining. Over time, however, public opinion in parts of the region shifted. Concerns grew about sovereignty, effectiveness, and the long-term results of foreign military presence. Niger's current leadership has taken steps to redefine those relationships. Agreements were reviewed. Military cooperation with France was reduced and eventually brought to an end. French troops withdrew. Diplomatic ties did not disappear completely, but they became more limited. This process did not happen overnight. It followed months of tension, negotiations, and political change inside the country. As France's presence declined, new actors became more visible. Russia increased diplomatic engagement, not only in Niger but across the Sahel. Embassies were strengthened. Military and security cooperation was discussed. Economic partnerships were explored. The landing of a new Russian ambassador in Niamey is part of that broader pattern. The AES plays a key role in this shift. Formed by Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso, the alliance focuses on mutual defense, political coordination, and shared sovereignty. All 3 countries experienced similar breaks with traditional Western partners. All 3 emphasized the need to control their own security decisions by acting together. They increased their collective influence. From a factual standpoint, this moment reflects changing alliances rather than sudden hostility. France did not leave Africa entirely, and Russia did not replace every role France once held. What changed is who is invited, who is trusted, and who has access. Diplomatic doors open and close based on interests, not sentiment. Analysts warn that these changes carry both opportunities and risks. On one hand, Niger and its AES partners gain more freedom to choose their partners. They reduce dependence on any single external power. On the other hand, shifting alliances can create uncertainty, especially in regions facing security challenges. Russia's growing presence raises questions about security arrangements. In some Sahel countries, Russian-linked security cooperation has focused on training, equipment, and advisory roles. Supporters argue this provides alternatives to previous models. Critics raise concerns about transparency and long-term outcomes. What is clear is that Niger is testing a different path. Economically, the implications are still unfolding. France was involved in key industries, and changes in partnerships may affect investment patterns. Russia may seek opportunities in mining, energy, and infrastructure, but these projects take time. In the short term, Niger will need to manage transitions carefully to avoid disruptions. Regionally, the AES is becoming more assertive. Joint statements emphasize shared security strategies and resistance to external pressure. This coordinated approach changes negotiations with international organizations and neighboring states. It also affects how aid, trade, and military cooperation are discussed. In Europe, these developments are being closely monitored. France's reduced role in Niger is part of a larger reassessment of Western influence in parts of Africa. Policymakers are debating what went wrong and how to respond. Some argue for renewed engagement through development and trade. Others call for patience and dialogue. For Africa as a whole, this moment highlights a broader trend. Several countries are reassessing long-standing relationships and asserting greater control over foreign policy. This does not mean cutting off all ties with the West or fully aligning with the East. It means diversifying options. Security remains the most sensitive issue. Niger faces threats from armed groups operating across borders. Any change in military partnerships must address this reality. Analysts warn that gaps in security cooperation could create risks if not managed carefully. New partnerships will be judged by results on the ground. Public opinion inside Niger is also important. Many citizens support decisions framed around sovereignty and independence. Others worry about economic influence through security, trade, and diplomacy. For Niger, balancing these interests will be a challenge. What is certain is that the era of automatic alliances is fading. Decisions are becoming more transactional, more interest-driven, and more openly debated. The AES is positioning itself as a bloc that wants to negotiate on its own terms. As Russia moves in diplomatically and France steps back, the situation remains fluid. The success or failure of this shift will depend on stability, economic performance, and security improvements over time. So the question for viewers is this: as Niger and its AES partners reshape their alliances, will this new direction bring the stability and independence they seek, or will it introduce new challenges that reshape the region once again? Another layer is unfolding in the Sahel, and it adds weight to what is already a historic realignment. Niger's acceptance of a new Russian ambassador is not happening in isolation. It comes at a time when the alliance of Sahel states is tightening coordination and redefining how power, security, and diplomacy work in this region. Facts on the ground show that this is less about sudden emotion and more about calculated repositioning. Diplomatic records confirm that Niger has scaled back its formal cooperation frameworks with France. Military agreements that once defined the relationship are no longer active. French troops have departed and operational coordination has ended. This followed political changes in Niger and growing pressure to reassess foreign involvement. These actions were taken through official announcements and legal processes, not informal gestures. At the same time, Niger has kept its embassies active and continued diplomatic engagement with multiple countries. What changed was priority. The arrival of a Russian ambassador signals that Moscow is now considered a key partner worth formal, long-term engagement at the highest diplomatic level. Ambassadors are not sent casually. They represent sustained interest in future planning. Russia's diplomatic expansion in the Sahel has been visible for several years. Embassies have increased staff. High-level visits have taken place. Security cooperation discussions have been reported by regional sources. In Niger's case, this move aligns closely with similar paths taken by Mali and Burkina Faso, both members of the AES. The AES itself was created in response to shared challenges. These include security threats, political pressure from outside the region, and dissatisfaction with past arrangements. The alliance emphasizes collective defense and mutual support. By acting together, these states aim to reduce vulnerability to external influence. France's historical role in Niger was deeply rooted. It extended beyond military cooperation into education, language, culture, and economic sectors. French companies operated in strategic industries, particularly uranium mining, which has global importance. Over time, debates emerged about whether these relationships truly benefited local populations or primarily served external interests. Niger's leadership framed recent decisions around sovereignty and national control. Official statements emphasized independence in decision-making. While France did not lose all influence overnight, the direction was clear. Military cooperation was no longer central, and diplomatic ties became more limited. Russia's approach differs in structure and messaging. It focuses heavily on state-to-state relations, security assistance, and symbolic support for sovereignty. Analysts warn that while this approach can appeal to governments seeking autonomy, it also places strong emphasis on security outcomes. Success or failure will be measured, not by promises but by results. Security is the most immediate concern. Niger sits at the center of several conflict zones, with armed groups operating across borders. The withdrawal of one security partner and the introduction of another creates a transition period. Analysts warn that such transitions can be risky if coordination gaps appear. So far, Niger has sought to manage this shift carefully. Cooperation with regional partners has increased. Joint security planning within the AES has intensified. Information sharing and coordinated responses are being prioritized. This reflects an understanding that no external partner can fully replace regional cooperation. Economically, the situation is more complex. France's reduced role may affect certain investments and aid flows. Russia has expressed interest in economic cooperation, including energy, mining, and infrastructure. However, large projects require time, capital, and stable conditions. In the short term, Niger faces the challenge of maintaining economic continuity during diplomatic change. Western governments are closely watching these developments. France's reduced influence in Niger is part of a wider pattern across the Sahel. Policymakers are debating whether previous strategies failed due to design, execution, or external factors. Some argue for renewed engagement based on trade and development rather than military presence. At the same time, Russia's growing footprint raises concerns in Europe and beyond. Analysts warn that increased competition in fragile regions can complicate peace efforts. Others argue that competition itself is not the issue, but rather how responsibly partners act. Within Niger, public opinion remains mixed. Many citizens support moves that emphasize sovereignty and dignity. Others worry about economic isolation or over-reliance on new partners. These concerns are not always visible internationally, but they influence domestic stability. The AES framework gives Niger political backing. Acting as part of a bloc reduces pressure on any single country. It also strengthens negotiation positions with external actors, including international organizations. This collective stance is reshaping how the Sahel is perceived diplomatically. From a factual perspective, this moment does not represent a full alignment with one global power against another. Niger continues to maintain relations with multiple countries. What has changed is hierarchy. Some partnerships are no longer prioritized, while others are being elevated. Analysts warn that long-term outcomes will depend on governance, transparency, and security performance. Diplomatic shifts alone do not solve economic or social challenges. If living conditions do not improve, public support may weaken regardless of foreign policy direction. Regionally, neighboring countries are adjusting their strategies. Some are strengthening border cooperation with AES members. Others are cautious, watching how new alliances affect stability. International organizations are also recalibrating engagement models to reflect the new political reality. This could mean a more fragmented but also more autonomous Sahel. Countries may pursue distinct paths while coordinating where interests align. External powers will need to adapt to a region that is less predictable and less willing to accept predefined roles. The presence of a Russian ambassador in Niger is therefore both a symbol and a test. It symbolizes a break from past dependence and a search for alternatives. It tests whether new partnerships can deliver security, investment, and stability without creating new forms of dependency. As months pass, the focus will shift from announcements to outcomes. Security conditions, economic indicators, and diplomatic behavior will be closely watched. Success will not be measured by rhetoric, but by whether everyday life improves. For the wider world, this shift challenges old assumptions. Africa, and the Sahel in particular, is not a passive stage for global competition. Local actors are making choices, forming alliances, and setting limits. So the question remains for viewers. As Niger and its AES partners continue to redefine their place in global politics, will this new balance of partnership strengthen regional stability, or will it reveal new pressures that reshape the Sahel once again?